Before I begin, write in the comments what city you're from and what time it is there right now. Let's see who's listening at night and who's listening in the morning. Thank you for your support. I hadn't even blown out the candles yet. He just handed me a grocery store bouquet and said, "Come on, Mom. I've got a surprise." The surprise smelled like exhaust and damp wool. I held the flowers in my lap, their wet stems leaving dark marks on my skirt. My son Brandon drove in silence, talking about work, the weather, never once looking at me. I smiled anyway, pretending not to notice he hadn't kissed me hello. 62nd birthday. I'd made pancakes, his favorite, set the table for two. He arrived full, said, "Don't bother, Mom. It's all taken care of." I thought he meant a restaurant. He meant the end. When the car turned off the highway, I saw the sign. Willow Pines Senior Living. The letters glimmered against gold leaves and the smell of disinfectant hit before the air conditioning stopped. "Brandon, what is this?" I asked. "It's safer here," he said. "Safer for who?" He stepped out, opened the trunk, and I saw my suitcase. Already packed. Even my toothbrush sealed in a bag. "Don't make this harder," he said. I didn't. I just stopped breathing. Inside smelled of overboiled vegetables and bleach. The receptionist smiled too brightly. Brandon took out a folder, forms, signatures, a notarized stamp. "Power of attorney," he said. "Makes everything easier." Easier for him. I stared at his hands. The same hands that once clutched a spoon of oatmeal, now erasing me with ink. "You're not letting me go home?" I asked. "Mom, please," he said flatly. The nurse led me to room 214. Beige walls, an adjustable bed. A window facing another wall. I sat on the mattress. It smelled of chlorine. A plastic cup of water stood on the table beside a single wilted carnation. The bouquet I'd brought lay beside it, petals already collapsing. Brandon lingered in the doorway. "I'll check on you next week," he said. He didn't. The door shut, leaving the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant rattle of carts. Somewhere down the hall someone laughed. A sound too alive for this place. That night I didn't sleep. The hallway light sliced under my door. The tap dripped. The sheets smelled like other people's endings. I lay still, hearing his voice loop in my head. "It's for the best." I tried to remember when he stopped saying Mom with warmth. Maybe when the money ran out. In the morning I asked for my phone. The nurse said gently, "Your son canceled the line. He said it confuses you." Her tone was kind, pitying. That was when I understood. I wasn't here to be cared for. I was here to disappear. I stopped eating. Not out of protest, my stomach just couldn't take it. Everything tasted like paper and salt. They called me sweetheart and dear. If they only knew. I was a woman who raised a man capable of calling betrayal love. 3 days passed. The sun crawled across the wall and vanished before noon. On the 4th, a new nurse appeared, young with neat braids tucked under her cap. Ruby, her badge read. "You're new here?" she asked. I nodded. "You don't look like the others," she said softly. For the first time in days I smiled. She blushed and left. The next day she returned, holding something folded. "Found this in Mr. Henley's Bible. He passed last week. No family." It was a lottery ticket, yellowed and creased, numbers written in blue ink. I gave a dry laugh. "You think luck still remembers me?" "Sometimes," she said. "The world owes good people something." That night, boredom and hopelessness teamed up. I sat at the old lounge computer, its keyboard sticky with crumbs, and typed the numbers. One click. Then another. My breath caught. 7 million. I read it twice. 3 times. My hands flew to my mouth. No joy, only a surge of fear. If Brandon ever found out. I printed the confirmation, folded it tight, and hid it beneath my clothes. My heart thudded loud enough to wake the dead. At dawn I found Ruby. "I need a lawyer," I said. She didn't ask why. Just nodded. "There's a volunteer comes Fridays. He helps residents with wills." When the man arrived, he looked young, sharp, calm. "Aaron," he said, shaking my hand. I slid the paper toward him and whispered, "Help me disappear." He didn't flinch. Within 2 hours the papers were ready. A blind trust, a new address, a prepaid phone. My name nowhere. Brandon would never touch a cent. Ruby hugged me before I left. "Don't forget us when you're free," she said. If I do, I told her. That means it worked. Before sunrise, I slipped out wearing someone else's coat and carrying a small duffel. Behind me, the smell of bleach and betrayal. Ahead, the quiet of a bus station and air so cold it bit my lungs. They thought I was frail, senile, finished. But I'd just gone silent long enough to learn how to strike. I left Ohio that morning and never looked back. On my 62nd birthday, the day my own son abandoned me, I stopped being the mother who waited by the phone and became the woman who writes her own ending. I spent the first 3 nights in a roadside motel with paper-thin walls and a heater that rattled like a tired breath. The air smelled of wet carpet and old cigarettes. I didn't care. I was free even if freedom felt more like shock than peace. I ate soup from a vending machine, slept with my bag under my arm, and kept the lottery confirmation folded against my chest. Each time a car passed outside, I flinched. That's how fear teaches you. You start counting sounds instead of hours. Aaron had arranged everything. A house in rural Tennessee, registered under a trust name that wasn't mine. No trail, no link, no trace. When I boarded the bus at dawn, the windows were fogged, and my reflection looked like someone halfway erased. The road stretched out gray and endless. I thought about Brandon and wondered if he'd already gone through my drawers again, just to make sure the house was empty. Maybe he'd call the facility, pretend to worry. Maybe he'd even get sympathy for it. He was always good at performance. The house sat off a narrow gravel road surrounded by bare trees. 1-story brick, a crooked mailbox, but it had a lock, running water, and silence. I unpacked slowly, 2 sweaters, a framed photo of Richard, my late husband, and the folded printout that changed everything. I hid it in a fireproof box Aaron had given me, along with my new will and the prepaid phone. I put them under a loose floorboard near the hallway closet. My body finally stopped trembling when the latch clicked shut. Days passed in slow motion. I woke before sunrise, brewed weak coffee, sat by the window watching the frost burn off the field. No TV, no chatter, just the ticking of the wall clock and the hum of my own thoughts. Freedom, it turned out, had a sound. Quiet, steady, suspiciously fragile. I checked the news online through a borrowed connection at a nearby library. Nothing. No missing person alerts. No investigation. Just silence. That was worse. It meant he was waiting. A week later, a knock shattered that silence. My pulse jumped. I froze. No one was supposed to know where I lived. I peered through the window. Delivery man, plain brown box, groceries from a service Aaron had arranged. Still, I waited until he drove away before touching the door. The package smelled faintly of oranges. Normal life had a smell too, I realized. I'd just forgotten it. That night I created a fake Facebook account. Curiosity is a dangerous hunger. I typed Brandon Taylor. His face appeared instantly, smiling, well-dressed, standing beside his wife at some charity dinner. The caption said, "If anyone has seen my mother, Margaret Taylor, please contact me or the Dayton police." My throat closed. Hundreds of comments beneath it. "Praying for you, what a good son, stay strong." I laughed so hard it hurt. He was searching for me, but not out of love. Out of control. What broke me wasn't the lie itself. It was the photo he used. An old picture 5 years ago, my birthday. I was wearing a paper crown, and he had his arm around me. We looked happy. I remembered that day. He'd borrowed money from me that morning, promised to pay it back by summer. He never did. The photo was his favorite kind of truth edited. That night I couldn't sleep. The house creaked with the weight of cold air. I sat by the fireplace, staring at the empty grate. The same thought kept circling. He did this for money. He wanted me gone. Then the other thought crept in, quieter but sharper. Maybe he's done it before. The next morning I lifted the floorboard, took out the folder Aaron had made for me. Old financial records, copies of tax returns, property deeds. I spread them across the kitchen table. Some pages smelled faintly of ink and dust, others of betrayal. I started reading line by line. Numbers, dates, signatures. Then I saw it. A loan document from 12 years ago, bearing my name and Richard's. I knew my own handwriting, and this wasn't it. The signature curled too neatly, too confident. Beneath it, Brandon's name. My heart dropped into my stomach. I pulled out more files, cross-checking. 3 other documents. All forged. All tied to small business loans Richard and I never took. One even dated 2 years after his death. My hand shook as I traced the letters of Richard's name. He hadn't just lied to me. He'd used his father's ghost to keep the scam alive. I called Aaron. My voice barely worked. He forged our names. All of them. Aaron's tone was calm, like a man who'd seen too many storms. "Do you want to press charges?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "I want to see how deep it goes." The next 3 days I became someone else. The woman who cooked and folded laundry disappeared. The one who tracked serial numbers and bank transfers took her place. I spent hours on the old laptop tracing transactions, account IDs, anything linked to my social security. The more I found, the clearer it became. Brandon had been siphoning money for years. Quietly, systematically. Some payments were small enough to vanish under noise. Others were enormous, hidden behind fake signatures. I remembered how Richard used to avoid bank mail toward the end. How his hands trembled when he signed checks. I thought it was age. Now I knew it was guilt. He must have discovered what Brandon was doing, tried to fix it, maybe even paid some of it off. My husband had carried our son's shame to the grave. The realization didn't make me cry. It made me still. Still like water before a storm. I sat for a long time in that cold Tennessee kitchen, surrounded by papers, the smell of stale coffee in the air, and whispered to no one, "You took everything. Now I take it back." That night I backed up every file on a flash drive, sealed it in a second envelope, and slid it beneath the fireproof box. I didn't know what I'd do next. Not yet. But I knew this. I wasn't the prey anymore. I was patient, invisible, and armed with proof. Outside, the wind scraped dry leaves along the porch. Somewhere far away, a dog barked. I turned off the light and watched the reflection of my own face in the window, calm, unreadable. Freedom, I thought, isn't running. It's preparing. And I was just getting started. By the 3rd week, I had stopped jumping at every sound. Fear had turned into focus, a colder, steadier thing. The kind that sharpens your sight. I spent my mornings cataloging documents, cross-referencing dates, teaching myself to read like an auditor. Aaron checked in every 2 days, his voice calm, professional. "You're safe," he kept saying. But safety felt like a rumor. It started one night around midnight. I couldn't sleep. The refrigerator hummed like static, and the air smelled of old dust and burnt coffee. I turned on the laptop again, searching public databases, county filings, business records. Anything with the name Brandon Taylor. The screen flickered, then stopped on something I hadn't seen before. A federal case docket. Embezzlement. Tax fraud. Identity misuse. The name wasn't common. It was him. I scrolled through the redacted pages. My stomach clenched. He'd been creating fake tax returns under dead identities. Some of them were elderly. Some were still alive. One was me. I stared at my own name in a federal record, the letters sharp and foreign. He'd filed multiple returns in my name. Fake incomes, fake deductions, using my social security number. My son hadn't just betrayed me. He had stolen me. I pushed the chair back and stood there, the wooden floor cold against my feet. The house was silent, but inside my head there was a hum like an alarm. It wasn't shock anymore. It was clarity. Every visit, every check I wrote, every mom just alone. All of it had been the setup. And when the lies got too heavy, he decided to hide the evidence, me. The next morning I called Aaron. "It's worse," I said. My voice didn't tremble this time. "He used my name. He's already under investigation." Aaron was quiet for a long moment. "Then we let the system work," he said. "But we make sure they know where to look." That day I started building a file. Every forged signature, every account statement, every scrap of correspondence. I labeled folders in neat black ink: loans, taxes, identity. I recorded audio notes, not because I was afraid of forgetting, but because I wanted my own voice to testify if I couldn't. "This is Margaret Taylor," I said into the recorder. "And this is the truth." By the end of the week, the dining table looked like a command center. Papers stacked in order, receipts clipped, timestamps marked. I could almost hear Richard's voice again, his gentle, steady tone when he balanced our old catering accounts years ago. He used to say, "Paper never lies." I smiled at that. Brandon might have forged signatures, but numbers don't love you back. They just wait to expose you. I mailed one copy of the evidence to the Department of Justice under an alias, no return address. Not to destroy him. Not yet. To plant a seed. If anything happened to me, they'd have a trail. I kept another copy locked under the floorboard. But paranoia has a smell, and soon it filled the house. Gasoline from the neighbor's mower. Cigarettes by the roadside. A car parked longer than usual under the tree. Once, a man knocked on the door claiming to do a neighborhood survey. I didn't open. Just watched from behind the curtain, hand tight around my phone. When he left, I waited another 10 minutes before breathing normally. That night, the wind picked up, slapping the shutters against the frame. I sat by the window listening. Somewhere deep inside I understood, he knew. Brandon could feel me out there like an old habit he couldn't quit. Maybe he'd heard from the bank. Maybe he'd guessed I'd escaped. The next morning I called Aaron again. We finalized everything, I said. The trust, the will, all of it. I want no legal path leading back to him. We did it over encrypted calls through coded transfers. He built walls of paper between me and my past. After that I started sleeping again. Not deeply but enough. I'd wake before dawn, watch the light crawl across the walls, and think about the strange shape of justice. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through documents, through signatures, through quiet women who stop being afraid. One evening, while sorting the last batch of records, I found a photo tucked between two receipts. Brandon at 12, smiling, holding a fishing rod, his father's arm around him. I stared at it for a long time. The boy in the photo had no idea who he'd become. Or maybe he did even then. Some lies start as habits. Others are born as instincts. I placed the photo back in the folder. I wasn't collecting memories anymore. I was collecting ammunition. A week later, a letter arrived. No return address, heavy paper. My name written in sharp slanted strokes I knew too well. Inside, one sentence. I know what you did. This isn't over. I didn't call Aaron. I didn't panic. I folded the letter once, slipped it into my growing archive, and whispered to the empty room. You're right. It isn't. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for him to come find me. I was waiting for him to fall. The courthouse in Dayton hadn't changed. Same beige walls, same cracked tiles, same stale air that smelled of floor polish and nerves. The last time I'd stood here, I'd paid a parking ticket. Now I was here to defend my sanity. Brandon had filed a petition to have me declared mentally incapacitated. I read the documents twice the night they arrived. His lawyer claimed I was unstable, confused, under external influence. They'd even attached a letter from a psychiatrist I'd never met, plus edited voicemails that made me sound unhinged. They called it concern. I called it an execution on paper. Aaron flew in the night before the hearing. He wore the same calm expression he always did, the kind that made chaos look small. We'll win, he said. I nodded, but inside my chest, something cold and coiled refused to settle. I wasn't afraid of losing my case. I was afraid of what it meant, that the boy I raised had grown into a man who would publicly erase me to protect himself. Morning came gray and heavy. I dressed carefully. Navy coat, silver buttons, Richard's old watch. Not armor exactly, just proof I still belonged to myself. When I stepped into the courtroom, Brandon was already seated at the front. He stood when I entered, smiling the same rehearsed smile he'd worn in every news interview. The worried son. The crowd whispered. Cameras flashed. His lawyer nodded at the judge and began. Your Honor, our client believes his mother has been manipulated by external parties. She disappeared for weeks, drained her accounts, and now refuses contact. We're here to ensure her safety. The words washed over me like static. Safety. Manipulated. Confused. They were building a cage out of kindness. Then came the recordings, my own voice, fractured into sound bites. A laugh cut mid-sentence, a sigh turned into a cry. The courtroom shifted uneasily. Even the judge frowned. Then Brandon spoke. I love my mother, he said softly, eyes glistening. I just want to help her. That's when I stood. My knees didn't shake. Your Honor, I said. I'd like to speak. The judge nodded. I walked to the stand. My name is Margaret Taylor. I am 62 years old, of sound mind, and not anyone's victim. I handed over the folder Aaron and I had prepared. Dr. Levine's full psychiatric report. 3 hours of evaluation. Signed, stamped, certified. Completely lucid, it read. No signs of cognitive decline. A ripple passed through the room. Brandon's lawyer shifted. The judge skimmed the report, his brow tightening. This appears thorough, he said. Anything else, Mrs. Taylor? Yes. I opened the second folder. Receipts, transfers, video calls, timestamps, all showing that I managed my finances independently. No third-party manipulation. Then I held up a sealed envelope. And one more thing. Evidence I'm withholding unless necessary. Brandon's jaw tightened. He knew. I didn't have to open it. The mere weight of that envelope said everything. I looked at the judge. My son placed me in a facility without consent. Took my phone. Took my freedom. Now he wants to take my voice. Please don't let him. Silence. Even the hum of the air conditioner faded. Aaron's pen stopped moving. Brandon's mask of pity cracked. For the first time he looked angry. Not worried, exposed. The judge leaned back, hands clasped. This court will review the medical report and financial documentation. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That's what he said. But Brandon wasn't going to wait that long. Outside, the reporters swarmed. Questions shouted, flashes popped. Mrs. Taylor, are you being exploited? Do you trust your son? I didn't answer. I walked straight through the noise, my heels echoing off the marble floor. Aaron caught up beside me. You did good, he said. I shook my head. I told the truth. Now he'll panic. And he did. That same evening, Brandon launched another media performance. The local news aired his statement. My mother has always been fragile. I just want her safe. She's being misled. His voice trembled on cue. People sympathized. They always do when the liar cries first. I sat in my small Tennessee living room, watching him perform concern while trying to bury me alive. My reflection in the TV screen didn't look like a victim anymore. It looked like a storm gathering. I called Aaron. It's time, I said. Send everything. He hesitated. All of it. Yes. To the Department of Justice. Anonymous drop. Let them open the box. He didn't argue. Within hours the files were gone. Forged signatures, false tax returns, fraudulent loans. Brandon had spent years weaponizing paperwork. Now it would turn on him. That night I made one more move. Using one of my new identities, I donated $5 million to a national nonprofit for elder protection. No name, no trace. Just the money and timing. A week later, they launched a campaign about financial abuse and coercion, stories like mine. The world began to whisper. Online, the comments shifted. Why would a loving son try to declare his mother incompetent? Why hasn't she spoken publicly? Something's off with him. The foundation didn't name me. They didn't have to. People connected the dots themselves. Brandon's perfect image began to fracture. A journalist named Sarah reached out to Aaron. We don't want names, she said. We want truth. I agreed to meet. We sat in a quiet cafe 2 towns over. She hit record. I told her everything, the nursing home, the betrayal, the silence, the letter. I left out the lottery. Not yet. 2 days later, the headline read, The Silencing of Margaret T. No photo, no address, just facts. Enough to light a match. When the second hearing came, Brandon walked into court with less color in his face. His lawyer whispered frantically. The judge looked tired but alert. Aaron stood first. Your Honor, he said. Since the last hearing, we've discovered that the petitioner is currently under federal investigation for multiple financial crimes, including identity misuse. Gasps filled the room. Brandon's lawyer tried to protest. The judge raised a hand. Sit down. Then Dr. Levine took the stand. Calm, precise, deliberate. Mrs. Taylor is not only competent, she said. She is extraordinarily aware. Her reasoning is intact. Her choices are intentional. I turned my gaze to Brandon. His hands were gripping the table so tightly his knuckles had turned white. When it was my turn, I stood once more. Your Honor, my son has called me confused, lost, unstable. But confusion doesn't build trusts, sign legal transfers, or uncover fraud. Love doesn't imprison. Love doesn't forge names. The judge's voice broke the stillness. Based on the evidence presented, the court dismisses the petition. Mrs. Taylor retains full autonomy over her finances in person. The gavel struck once. Brandon didn't look up. His mask had fallen completely now, jaw tight, eyes hollow. I gathered my papers and walked past him. He whispered, "You think this is over?" I leaned close enough for only him to hear. "No," I said. "It's just fair now." Outside, the wind was cold and clean. The courthouse doors slammed behind me, but for the first time in months, the sound didn't make me flinch. It sounded like closure. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the calm, a quiet voice said what I hadn't dared to before. Now he's the one trapped. The morning after the verdict, I woke before sunrise. The sky outside my Tennessee window was pale blue, almost empty. For the first time in months, I didn't feel hunted. I poured coffee, the smell filling the small kitchen, and sat at the table with the folded court papers beside me. My hands didn't shake this time. The judge's words still echoed in my head, competent and independent. Simple, legal, absolute. They couldn't lock me away again. Not on paper. Not in life. But freedom, I was learning, doesn't end the war. It just changes its shape. That afternoon Aaron called. His tone was quiet but steady. "Brandon won't stop. The federal case is moving, but he's still trying to control the narrative. Be ready for noise." The noise came fast. Local news. National blogs. Talk shows debating whether I was a misunderstood mother or a manipulated millionaire. My name wasn't always said aloud, just Margaret T. or the missing Ohio woman. But everyone knew. Brandon had given too many interviews for anyone to doubt who I was. He went on television again. I watched it alone, the sound low. He sat under bright studio lights, tie perfect, hair neat. "I forgive her," he said, voice trembling. "She's been through a lot. I just hope she finds peace." Peace. The word tasted like ash. I didn't answer the calls, didn't open my door. The world was talking about us, but I had work to do. Aaron and I finalized the paperwork to secure the trust. Every dollar moved through layers of legal insulation. If Brandon tried to reach for it, the system would bite back. A week later, the journalist, Sarah, reached out again. "People are turning," she said. "They want your side on record." I hesitated. Then I said, "One interview. My voice. My terms." We filmed it in a quiet studio in Nashville. No makeup, no dramatics. Just me and the truth. The lights were warm, the microphone close enough to catch my breath. Sarah asked, "Why now?" "Because silence isn't safety," I said. "They call it love when they take everything from you. They call it confusion when you fight back. I'm not confused anymore." She nodded, tears in her eyes. I told my story. Not with rage but with precision. The day he drove me to Willow Pines. The night I hid the lottery ticket. The forged papers. The courtroom. Every small cruelty that had led here. When the interview aired, the world tilted. People started writing to the station, women mostly. Daughters, mothers, wives. Messages flooded social media. "She's right. It happened to my aunt. To my grandmother. To me." Brandon stayed silent for 3 days. Then on the 4th, his lawyer released a statement. "My client is cooperating fully with authorities." That's when I knew. The cracks had become fractures. 2 weeks later, the news broke. Brandon Taylor under formal federal indictment for wire fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. I read the headline twice. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like gravity finally doing its job. He was released on bond. Money still bought him that. But his world was shrinking. His company collapsed within days. Partners distanced themselves. His wife, the same woman who'd smiled beside him in photos, filed for divorce through her attorney. Aaron called again. "He's cornered," he said. "The investigation is solid. They have his digital trail, the signatures, the accounts. He can't talk his way out this time." I wanted to feel triumph, but all I felt was the quiet weight of truth. Betrayal doesn't end with headlines. It lingers in the ordinary things. The way you double-check every lock. The way your heartbeat stutters when the phone rings. One night, while washing dishes, I found the photo still tucked behind a magnet on the fridge. Brandon at 5 years old, icing on his face, my hand steadying the cake knife. For a moment, I let myself remember him that way. Before greed. Before masks. Before this. Then I slipped the photo into an envelope and placed it in the drawer with the others. Not to keep. Just not to throw away. A few days later, an envelope slid under my front door. No return address. Inside a photo, my 60th birthday again. The same image he'd once posted online. On the back, his handwriting. You always believed in me. I'm sorry that wasn't enough. I read it once. Then again. I didn't cry. I didn't forgive. I just stood there, hearing the wind knock softly against the windows and whispered, "Neither was I." The next morning I burned the picture in the fireplace. Not out of hate. Out of release. The paper curled, the colors melted, and for the first time I felt light. People in town started recognizing me. The pharmacist slipped a note into my prescription bag. My mom watched your story. Thank you. The cashier at the diner paid for my coffee, from one daughter to another. I smiled politely, grateful, but deep down, I knew I hadn't won anything. I'd survived something. That's different. Aaron visited one last time. He looked tired but proud. They offered him a plea deal, he said. 10 years. Maybe less if he cooperates. I nodded. He'll take it. He studied my face. You sure you're okay? I'm not okay, I said. I'm just free. That's enough. That night I stood by the window watching snow start to fall. The flakes caught the streetlight like ash in a cold fire. I thought about Richard. About all the years I'd believed that love could fix what truth could only expose. Freedom doesn't heal you. It just stops the bleeding. And for the first time in my life, the bleeding had stopped. The first snow came quietly that year. It dusted the porch rail, the empty mailbox, the gravel path that led to the road where no one ever stopped. I stood at the window, coffee cooling in my hands, and thought about endings. Not dramatic ones. The small, quiet kind that come after too much noise. Brandon had accepted the plea deal. 10 years. I didn't go to the hearing. I didn't need to watch him explain the wreckage he'd made of both our lives. The papers said he cried when he pled guilty. I didn't believe it. Brandon always cried on cue. After the news broke, I started receiving letters. Dozens at first, then hundreds. Most from strangers, women who'd seen the interview, who whispered that my story had given them courage to leave someone, to speak, to start again. I read every one. Some came with photos of families, others with trembling handwriting from nursing homes far away. You made me feel seen, one said. You made me believe it's not too late. I kept them in a wooden box beside the fireplace, the same place where his picture had burned. Paper has a strange power. It destroys and it redeems. A week later, I drove back to Willow Pines. I hadn't planned to. I just woke one morning, packed a bag, and followed the road north. The closer I got, the heavier the air felt. Not from fear but memory. When I pulled into the parking lot, the sign looked the same but the building didn't. Fresh paint. New benches. Someone had planted flowers near the entrance. I sat in the car for a while before stepping out. The glass doors slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the lobby was brighter. Real plants now, not plastic. The receptionist was new. But then from the hallway I saw her, Ruby. Her braids were shorter now, her smile exactly the same. She froze when she saw me. Margaret, she said, voice breaking. You're here. I nodded. I am. She ran toward me and hugged me, no hesitation, no pity. Just warmth. It had been so long since anyone had held me like that, like a person, not a problem. You changed everything, she whispered. The donations, the programs. They talk about you all the time. You're a legend here. I shook my head. I just told the truth. She led me through the corridors. The place smelled different now, less bleach, more coffee and cinnamon. The old room 214 had been converted into a reading lounge. Sunlight spilled across shelves of donated books. A new nurse was helping an older man with a crossword puzzle. He smiled when I passed. For a second I couldn't breathe. This was the same place where I had sat, coat still on, feeling erased. Now it was alive. They had asked me to speak that afternoon. Ruby had arranged it without telling me. Nothing formal, she said. Just a few residents. They'd like to hear from you. The room was small, chairs arranged in a semicircle. Some faces I recognized from my first days, others new, curious. I stood by the window. Outside, snow drifted slowly, catching light like dust in a dream. I'm not here because I'm rich, I began. And not because I was wronged. I'm here because I was silenced. And I know what that feels like. The room was still. No one coughed. No one looked away. They called me fragile, I said. Said I was confused. They told me the world was safer without my voice. Maybe they believed it. But silence isn't safety. It's slow death. Someone in the front row began to cry quietly. You are not forgotten, I said. You are not a burden. And you are not finished. When I stopped speaking, the room stayed silent for a few heartbeats, and then the applause came, soft, unsure, then growing. I smiled, though my throat burned. Ruby's eyes were shining. Later that evening, before I left, she pressed an envelope into my hand. For the Margaret Project, she said. Inside was a check. Not large but written with trembling care by the staff themselves. We wanted to help, she said. The Margaret Project. That was the name Aaron and I had chosen for the foundation we built in the months after the trial. Its mission was simple: to protect elders from financial and legal abuse, to fight back against quiet theft done in the name of love. We hired lawyers, volunteers, partnered with shelters and courts. Every case was another voice pulled out of silence. The press tried to reach me again when the foundation launched. I declined every interview. I'd already said what mattered. Now it was time to build, not talk. Brandon wrote once from prison. The letter came through Aaron, who held it out like something fragile. He says it's an apology, he told me. I didn't open it. I told him to send it back. Some words don't heal. They just reopen wounds that have finally started to scar. Instead, I wrote letters of my own to Ruby, to Aaron, to Dr. Levine, thanking them for standing beside me when I couldn't stand on my own. I ended each one the same way. You didn't save me. You reminded me I could save myself. That winter, the house felt warmer. I learned to fill the silence with small things. Reading, gardening, feeding stray cats that wandered onto the porch. The lottery money was still there, untouched except for the foundation. People thought it was the miracle that changed my life. It wasn't. The miracle was that I'd learned to stop defending the people who broke me. One evening, as the fire cracked and the snow fell again, I opened a blank page in my journal. The room smelled of pine and tea. I wrote a single line. Freedom doesn't mean forgetting. It means owning the story. I closed the book, set it on the mantel beside the wooden box of letters, and whispered, "Thank you, Ruby." For once, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The year turned quietly. No fireworks, no countdown. Just the sound of wind against the windows and the clock ticking in the kitchen. I was sitting by the fire, my cat curled on the rug, a pen in my hand. The house was still, so still it felt sacred. I had spent months rebuilding a life, piece by piece, without apology. The Margaret Project had grown faster than I imagined. Dozens of calls came every week from people who'd been silenced like I was. Some whispered. Some shouted. All of them wanted the same thing: to be heard. Aaron stopped by sometimes, always carrying folders, always smiling that patient smile. "They've named you in 3 national articles," he said one afternoon. "You've become the face of justice." "I don't want to be a face," I told him. "Just a warning." He laughed softly. "That's exactly what makes it work." After he left, I went for a walk through the snow-covered field behind the house. The sky was a flat gray sheet, the kind that makes everything look sharper. Each step crunched underfoot, echoing in the empty space. I thought about all the versions of myself that had lived and died in the past year. The woman waiting by the phone, the one sitting silent in room 214, the ghost who slipped onto a bus before dawn. None of them were gone, not really. They just lived differently now, inside someone stronger. Brandon's sentencing came in early spring. 10 years. Fraud. Identity theft. Wire manipulation. Words that used to belong to other people's stories. His lawyer called it a tragedy. I called it the truth finally catching up. The news ran a short segment. Local businessman sentenced after exploiting elderly parent. I didn't watch it. I didn't need to. 2 days later, I found another letter in my mailbox, this time from his wife Claire. She wrote that she'd left him, that she'd started over in another state with their children, and that she was sorry she hadn't believed me sooner. She ended with one sentence that stayed with me. "You showed me what survival looks like when no one claps for it." I read it twice, folded it neatly, and placed it in the wooden box with the others. Life became smaller after that, but never dull. The mornings had their rituals now, the sound of the radio, the cat pawing at the door. I began teaching myself how to paint again, something I hadn't done since before Richard died. The smell of turpentine filled the room, soft and chemical. I painted trees, hands, open windows, things that could breathe. Sometimes the mail brought news from the foundation. Another grant approved, another case won. Each victory felt quiet, almost private, like planting seeds I'd never lived to see grow. That was fine. I'd learned not to need applause. Then one morning, as snow melted along the fence line, I sat at my desk and opened a fresh sheet of paper. It was time to write one last letter, the only one that truly mattered. I wrote slowly, carefully, as if speaking to someone fragile. Dear Margaret, you weren't crazy. You weren't too trusting. You weren't weak. You were a woman who loved too much and believed too long. They tried to write you out of your own life, but you found the pen and finished the story yourself. I paused, my throat tight. The fire popped softly behind me. You did more than survive, I wrote. You turned pain into proof, silence into voice, and loss into light. I am proud of you. I signed it simply with love, yourself. Then I folded the page, placed it inside the wooden box beside the others, and set it on the mantel. The cat jumped into my lap, purring against my arm. The room smelled faintly of pine and ashes. Outside, the wind shifted, and for a moment I thought I heard laughter, the kind that once belonged to the boy I used to know. I didn't turn toward it. Some ghosts don't need to be chased. I whispered, "Goodbye, Brandon," and let the words settle like snow. Freedom isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It just fills the air where fear used to live. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and smiled. The story was finished. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to Revenge Veil. Thanks for watching.